Welcome to the Law School Strategy Podcast, your weekly home for tips, advice, exclusive interviews, and other insights into landing that coveted legal job by graduation. We're here to help every law student develop their law school strategy. Don't go through law school blind. It's time to get out of the classroom, put your books down, and finish that outline later. Now, here's your host, Franklin Graves.
Hi, welcome to another episode. We have a great show in store for you this week. First up, we'll be talking with Irene Mo, who is a 3L at the Michigan State University College of Law. She'll provide some great insights into her journey, and she's done a lot throughout her law school career, and I know that you can learn something from it. Later on in the show, I'll be talking with Laura Bergus and Josh Auriemma, who I actually used to listen to on their own podcast show called the Legal Geekery Podcast. They'll share some insights and share their law school strategy and how they graduated from law school with a job. Let's go ahead and kick it off with my interview with Irene. Hey, Irene.
Hi, Franklin. How are you?
Doing well. I'm so excited that you took some time to talk, and I think a lot of law students can learn from what you've been able to accomplish during the short 3 years of law school. So can we just start back up a little bit before law school and kind of give a background into what you did before law school?
Yes. So I went to the University of Michigan Dearborn, and I got my undergraduate degrees in mathematics and economics. And throughout my undergrad career, I clerked at a law firm in Detroit. I was a personal banker at Citizens Bank. And then I also did political fundraising with a couple of statewide races.
Great. So why did you decide to go to law school?
I was inspired to go to law school when my parents were in the process of buying their Chinese restaurant when I was in middle school. It was one of my dad's American dreams to own his own restaurant. And since my parents didn't have great English skills, I was tasked with the responsibility of helping them find an attorney. And during this process, I found it to be more difficult than I think it should be. There weren't many attorneys that are Chinese American who are doing anything other than immigration law or in big law, especially in the Midwest. So I saw that there was a need for someone in my community to step up and become an attorney. And since then, I've been inspired to go to law school.
Wow, that's such an incredible, very personal story and a very personal reason. I'm sure that at times has been a great resource to kind of help you through the struggles of law school.
Definitely.
So while you've been in law school, you've been involved and active. So when did you start searching for internships and make that decision that that's what you needed to kind of propel your resume and your career forward?
Mm-hmm. When I was a 1L, I started looking into internships right after I finished my first semester exams. And what I did was, at first I just reached out to companies that I thought were really cool and that could provide me a good internship experience. You know, I said, you might not do internships, you might not do legal internships, but I am willing to work with you to develop some of these aspects that would be necessary for me to get, professional growth while I was at your company. And some of the stuff was Polyvore, which is like a fashion company. I reached out to CrossFit HQ to see if they would take on some internships. And I just did a lot of cold emailing. And when that didn't work, I looked through my career services job bank and found jobs that way. Then my second year, I started looking again towards November, December time, and that job search lasted until mid-March.
Okay, so that's excellent. That's excellent. I'm really excited to hear that you hit the ground running right after your first semester, after those exams ended. So what were some of the things that you learned from that process? Because I know a lot of law students feel that, especially after the first semester, and they don't even have a second semester under their belt, they don't feel like they're adequate enough, or they don't have the experience. So how did you overcome that? From what you described, it sounds like you did what I recommend law students do, which is position yourself as best as you can of how you're going to benefit the company and not be a drain on the company. But what was your personal experience in trying to overcome those hurdles?
So something that I think was actually a detriment to me when I first started looking for jobs was that I had such a diverse background prior to coming to law school. And, people always gave me the side eye whenever they heard I was a math and econ major. Like, what are you doing in law school? What are you doing in politics? So what I had to do was really figure out a way to tell my story so that everything I did prior to coming to law school and, even in my first semester as a 1L, was to benefit me and take me to the next step of getting the job. So something that I had to figure out was how to sort of weave my experience together into a cohesive story.
It seems like you were successful in doing that. Speaking of finding a focus and narrowing that down, I kind of noticed that you've established yourself, similar to a guest I had on last week, in the technology and for you specifically, the privacy law sector. So as a law student, we hear all the time, you're not supposed to narrow yourself. You want to try to be as broad and be as applicable to any job opening that you might find or network connection you might make. So how did you handle that delicate balance of distinguishing yourself in a particular area or field and also not closing any doors that might be opened?
So the way I approach law school is that there's substantive legal knowledge, which I've chose to sort of specialize in the information privacy and security space. But then there is sort of the practical side. And what my law school likes to talk about is the T-shaped lawyer. So the standing part of the T is the deep substantive legal knowledge. And then the crossband of the T are all these, what they call now, soft skills that you need to learn. So you're not trying to be an expert in, quantitative analysis or, business development, but you need to know a little bit of everything enough for you to work with other people and to have the skills to be able to pivot from one thing or another. So what I focused on a lot in law school were taking classes to help me build out that T, as well as focusing specifically on the substantive legal knowledge of information privacy and security law. So now that when I'm looking for a job, I can really be in any position because I have the practical skills that apply to a lot of different substantive legal areas. But what I would prefer is to be in the information privacy and security space.
Wonderful. It sounds like your school's done a great job of preparing you. And I actually first encountered you and ran across you through your involvement with the ABA's section of intellectual property law. And there's actually a Women in IP action group that you were emailing back and forth with some people on. And I'm going to read what you wrote in response to another attorney. Her name is Ida, and she's a good friend of mine. But when she asked you what area of law you were interested in practicing, you emailed back and said, "My dream job would be to litigate in information privacy and security law. As my first job out of law school, I would be happy in any position that can help me develop skills to get there." I thought that was a great approach to take and something that a lot of law students can learn from, because it's certainly not like when I read that, I was like, oh, here's somebody, a law student who's very clearly focused on and knowledgeable about what she wants to do, but at the same time is flexible and realizing the job market is what it is and is willing to work to get to that point eventually, no matter what that path might be. So I love that, and I appreciate you letting me share that with the listeners. Did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think it just goes back to, again, learning how to weave your story together and to make sure that every experience you have is a learning experience so that you can get to your dream job.
Excellent. And I can't help but also talk about diversity, because I know that's a huge impact. That's how we first met, was in a diversity group. So I want to ask you, what do you find valuable from your involvement in diversity initiatives and programs? Because I know that you are a Miss JD Fellow. You've also been involved in the Equal Justice America Legal Services Fellowship and the ABA section of intellectual property law. So can you kind of describe what you have found valuable from involvement in those types of initiatives?
I think it's really important, especially as a woman of color in the law and specifically in legal technology, to give yourself a voice, because and getting a JD is a privilege, and it's a privilege that not a lot of people have. So when you're sort of in this area of privilege, I think that you should use your voice to sort of uplift people who are coming after you. And I think it's really important to get involved in these diversity organizations, to give back and to sort of have a purpose in life and what you're doing, and to remind yourself that the legal field isn't just about you, it's about something bigger that really has the power to change the world.
I love that. It sounds like your focus and you recognize that your purpose is greater than yourself when it comes to some of these initiatives that you're involved with. So excellent job on that. One last question for you I'd like to wrap up with is any advice that you have to other law students that might be a 1L or 2L that are younger than you, and they're rapidly approaching graduation and they're trying to get involved and make a splash in the legal community. You've done really well at that so far. So what have you found works well, or what advice would you give to somebody trying to follow in your footsteps?
For me personally, I found Twitter to be a really great tool to build out your relationships. I know that sometimes meeting people at conferences is very hit and miss. You meet them, you get their card, they get your card, and you might connect with them on LinkedIn. But what I've been able to do is build out my relationships further on Twitter by interacting with them, making sure I retweet their stuff, or even just replying to their comments. I think that is a really good tool to, build yourself up professionally, show a little bit of your personality in there as well. I've also written a few blogs, some on the substantive legal area of privacy law, but also some about diversity issues, which again is that professional, personal mix that I think is really important to sort of show people that, you're not just this law student who's buried in her books. You're someone who has experienced things in the world and you have something to say. Like when I was a 1L, I did this thing where I had a coffee hour every week with a different professional. And,
yes,
the big question is a lot of them were I don't know if I can help you, especially this area of law, but here are some general tips. So then I would always ask okay, well, do you know someone else that I could talk to that might be able to help? And that I always kept building my network that way. And the way that it's helped is that a lot of my friends who are looking for internships or jobs now, I'm these attorneys have remembered me and they're hey, we're looking to hire a new graduate to train and, invest in them. And I'm well, I'm not good for it, but here's my friend who I want to put my name to who does good work and, connect with them that way.
And I did the same thing. I encourage students. I actually just had coffee last week with a law student. And at the end, I stopped her before we left. I said, just so you know, you should be asking me as well as anybody else you talk with for at least 2 people that I can introduce you to. That way it opens you up to my network. So I schooled her on that a little bit and she appreciated it. I was really nice about it. But
yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly what you need to be doing. And it shows that you are actually trying to get something out of this interview other than hey, give me a job. I don't think a lot of law students realize that you can't just ask for something right away. You need to build a relationship and then make the ask.
So what has been something that you've learned through the job search that you'd like to share?
I think the most important thing I've learned is that timing doesn't mean anything. If you're, late in the game and getting the job, don't worry, because there's always another opportunity out there. And especially for me, last year I was interviewing for a position and it was me and my other good friend who were, in the final round of interviews. So we were going head to head and I had just finished my interview and then I got an offer for my dream internship at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University. So it just goes to show you that no matter how many positions that you might get rejected from or that you might have to pass up, there's always going to be something out there that you can make work for you.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And that's one reason why I always encourage law students to apply to more than just one opportunity. Don't have your heart set on just one opportunity or one thing that you're going to put all your eggs into that one basket. Because when I was a 2L, actually going into my spring semester, I had sent out probably 20 applications and I heard back from one of them first. That was one that I really was so excited about. And then I heard back from a second one probably 2 weeks after I had already accepted that first one. And it was an in-house position that I was dying to get experience with. But unfortunately, I had already, not unfortunately, it was very fortunate. I was in a position to make that choice. So I feel like law students, you should be setting yourself up to having to make that difficult choice of which internship or maybe which opportunity you're going to have to decide between. So excellent point to make. I appreciate you bringing that up. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can follow up if they have another question or want to reach out to you directly? What's the best way to reach you?
The best way to reach me is through my email, which is irene.mo@outlook.com. law.com, or they can connect with me on LinkedIn and, of course, Twitter.
Excellent. I think that wraps everything up. I really appreciate you taking the time. It was a really
of course.
great
Thank
interview.
you for showcasing me. Hopefully this will help me get a job. You can put that in there too, because I am still looking.
I definitely am going to share this with the Women in IP Action group, because I feel like they would love to see this and love to hear us talking about your involvement in that committee. So next, we're going to hear from Josh Auriemma and Laura Bergus as we discuss how they graduated from law school with a job. This time on How I Graduated from Law School with a Job, I'm excited to have two attorneys joining us. We have Josh Auriemma from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Laura Bergus from Iowa City, Iowa. Hey, Josh and Laura.
Hey.
I'm glad you both were able to join. Thank you for taking the time. Some of our viewers may recognize the two of you from your past part-time gig of running the Legal Geekery Podcast, which I definitely want to touch on later. However, let's first go back to before that show even existed. And Laura, I'll start off with you with the first question. What did you do or study before law school, and why did you go to law school?
Before law school, I had a bachelor's in anthropology from my hometown school, the University of Iowa. And I was actually working for a small town government doing communications before going to law school. I think I decided to go to law school because I did a short documentary about homelessness in my home state of Iowa. And through that process, kind of realized that lawyers were people who could make a difference. And I was not going to be going to grad school for anthropology, so law was a good option.
And where did you end up going to law school?
Also at the University of Iowa in my hometown.
Okay, great. Josh, how about you? What did you do before law school, and why did you make the decision to go to law school?
So I studied physics and math. I was specifically interested in theoretical particle physics. So I worked for Columbia University. I worked for Fermilab and CERN through Columbia. And I was working with some pretty amazing particle physicists. And I was a good physics student. I was, middle of my class or so. I wasn't like phenomenal. And when I worked with those theoretical particle physicists, I was like, wow, these people are so much smarter than I will ever be. There's like a point at which I knew I could work only so much and only get so good. And around that time, I want to say it was my junior year, the end of my junior year, I had no plans to go into law school. And I took a business law class. And in that class, I had an awful traditional paper chase law school professor who was hardcore Socratic method, would post everybody or would hand back exams in the order that they scored. And in that, there were a lot of people in the class. There were like 200 people.
This was an undergrad?
Yeah, I was an undergrad. And on every single exam, on every single quiz, I was the top student by a lot. And that never happened to me before in math or in physics ever. So I was like, maybe this is something I should look into. So I joined the mock trial team. I became the president of the pre-law society. Just started upping my credentials and studied for the LSAT. And I did it. It was actually kind of a paper, like a coin toss for me, whether I was going to end up in a PhD physics program or go to law school, but law school won out.
Great. And where did you end up going to law school?
I went to Penn State Law.
Okay. And now I will go ahead and switch over to the question that everybody wants to know, Josh. Did you graduate from law school with a job? And if so, how did you do it?
Yeah, I did graduate with a job. I was, I had pretty good credentials coming out of law school. I was on the ed board of my law review. I was on moot court. So I was one of those students that you kind of expect to have a job just in general based on credentials, even when the economy sucked in 2010. But there's a lot of stuff that I was doing in law school to kind of, set up for that maybe not being the case when I graduated, meaning that, I knew the economy was terrible. I knew that I shouldn't expect to have an offer, even though, I had some pretty good credentials coming out of law school. So I did a lot of things that maybe I wouldn't have done otherwise if I'd graduated earlier. So one thing is I created Legal Geekery, which was initially a blog. And we said the tagline was an outlet for some geeks in law school. And it was just, a way for us to kind of talk about law and things we were interested in. We started the podcast a little bit, probably a year after we started the actual blog itself. And I did that for a long time, and I made a lot of friends on Twitter, and I ended up going to like Legal Tech and a bunch of conferences where I could meet people and kind of make connections. I was in kind of a weird situation just personally, so I was kind of tied geographically to the area where my law school was. Not a whole lot of interesting IP jobs there, so I ended up taking a job to run the appellate division of a smallish, mid-sized PA law firm right out of law school. And it was not exactly kind of what I wanted to do, but super interesting in that I was kind of handling really interesting, complex constitutional issues myself my first year out of law school. Whereas, a lot of my friends went into big law and kind of are like maybe just getting around to that now that they're seventh years. Yeah, it was definitely a weird, interesting, non-traditional route, one that there's kind of no plan for, but, sometimes you just fall into it.
Okay, and Laura, I'll ask you the same question. Did you graduate from law school with a job? And if so, how did you do it?
I did. I actually didn't know that I was going to be practicing law until maybe a couple weeks before taking the bar. I figured I'd have some kind of job in like municipal administration or policy, maybe lobbying, something like that. And I had coffee with a woman who's now my law partner at the firm where I'm at now, who I knew from my work with the small town that I'd been working for. And she was just like, you should send us your resume, see what happens. Maybe you would like law practice. And it was one of those definitely right time, right place, knowing the right people kinds of things. I didn't apply for any other jobs before I got that one.
Wow, that's definitely not what you typically hear about with law students.
That's so funny because like I feel like that happens a lot, right? I remember reaching out to somebody who went to my undergrad and being like, I think they worked at Choate in Boston, and I was like, hey, can we just like chat about I don't know whatever at the time? And she was like, why don't you just give me your resume? And I was like, okay. Literally never talked to this lady again. They flew me out to Boston to interview me. Like that was it. Like yeah, it's really weird how that stuff happens.
Yeah.
So Laura and Josh already mentioned this a little bit, but you mentioned the Legal Geekery Podcast. Can you expand on that and kind of talk about any doors that might have opened for you? You mentioned getting involved in the Twitter community. Talk about why you started that blog and how you both got connected at that point.
Yeah, I'd been blogging a long time before I started the Legal Geekery Podcast, and it was just personal stuff. Like I had an old school live journal, and I think at some point, like my 1L year, maybe when I was a 0L, I took a look at it and I was like, wow, this should like never be in public again. Like we need to delete all of this and forget that this existed. But I still wanted to write, and now since law was kind of my life, it was like, this is something I know about. Why don't I do this? So it was kind of like, it really was just an outlet for me at first, but it sort of turned into, we got a lot of traction. A lot of people were reading it. I had one of my really good friends who now works for a big firm in New York, wrote with me at the time. And then we just got to have so many readers that I felt like we needed more people. So I kind of put out a call for people who were interested in writing for us. And I think Laura answered the call. And there are also 3 other people, I believe, who eventually started writing for us. 3 or 4. And then I wanted to do a podcast because there actually kind of weren't any at the time for law, specifically for law students. There maybe were 1 or 2 like bar associations doing podcasts, but like I don't think there was another law school podcast at the time. And so Laura thankfully agreed to do it with me. I didn't want to do it myself. I wanted to have like kind of an intelligent discussion about things we were learning, and she was at a different place than I was. Now I was more or less right out of undergrad, and Laura had some more experience than I did, and she obviously went to a different school. So I just thought kind of having the banter would be interesting, and I think through that we started having a lot of really interesting guests on the show. And there's something to be said for sitting down and talking to somebody who you kind of otherwise maybe would be talking to on Twitter. Like I have good friends that I made through Twitter, but there's no substitute for sitting down and having like an actual conversation with somebody. So I made some pretty good connections through there, I felt like.
Yeah, and Laura, what about you?
I don't really have a lot to add to that. I mean, this was definitely Josh's baby, and I felt super lucky to be able to come in on that. I was really intimidated by his resume and experience and level of like scientific intelligence because my
You're a visitor.
My dog's really loud. Come here. Okay.
Beautiful.
There we go.
Oh, and I'm really sad that we never got to do an episode with your pug, Josh.
Well, she didn't exist
beautiful.
at the time.
She's lovely. But like,
Thank you.
as Josh said, I was at a little bit different place. I had a young child and was settled down in my hometown and just happened to be going to law school. And it was neat to have such different perspectives, not just between the two of us, but like all the different guests that we had on the show. And we would pull topics together from, trying to be pretty broad ranging, not necessarily stuff that we were even studying or knew much about, but just to have an intelligent conversation and some back and forth on, whatever was maybe some legal news at the time. And that was, my recollection of how it came together was just what Josh said. And I also had been blogging in a couple different places and had a similar personal blog that probably never should have seen the light of day. But, got knew a number of people through Twitter and did a lot of like social media for law school, blogging and writing and policy and that kind of thing. And that, thankfully, I think didn't really tie in substantively to Legal Geekery too much, but had some of the same circles, some overlap in the people that we knew.
Yeah,
So
I feel like at
did
the
either
end
of
of
you
law
ever-
school, weren't you kind of like traveling to bar associations and talking about like ethics stuff? Or was that after?
Yeah, no, it was during that time. I was working for a firm in St. Paul during law school, doing like some policy consulting and traveling around doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good way to get your face in front of some interesting people.
So did either of you have an opportunity to bring this up during interviews, or did you get asked about it at all?
Yeah, I definitely got asked about it. One of my weirdest experiences was I clerked at Stanford, the Center for Internet and Society. And I had to, for some reason, somebody sent me to a meeting with the law librarians. And I didn't know who they were, but we sat down and they were like, when is Legal Geekery going to come up here? It's like, I'm Legal Geekery, I guess. I don't. But yeah, I definitely put it on my resume. People definitely talk to me about it. I occasionally would have somebody who had like read the blog or heard the podcast, which was really nice because it gave us like kind of an instant rapport, something to talk about. And people who generally were reading Legal Geekery, I feel like were people who at least were like a little bit tech leaning. So I knew kind of instantly that we had something in common. And that just made things a lot more comfortable, especially when you're sitting in with a partner or like a more senior associate, and it's super intimidating. It just helps break the ice a little bit.
So one other question I wanted to ask is, before we move on from the topic of Legal Geekery, I wanted to ask, there are probably some law students, and I worried about this when I was a law student, and you might as well. What advice would you give to law students worried about either taking on a topic that is a very hot topic, either in technology or for myself in copyrights or trademarks, and having an opinion about that and whether it will follow with them on down the road if they try to get a job with somebody who doesn't necessarily agree with those opinions? What advice do you have to law students that maybe are shy or hesitant to put something in writing or in a permanent format online? What would you tell them?
Well,
I'll let you answer that one.
Okay, I'll just jump in. Yeah, I would say that there's, even if someone doesn't agree with your opinion, they should respect you for being willing to put it out there. And I've had a lot of intelligent conversations with people who maybe had the opposite opinion that I had, but we knew we could talk about it because I'd actually taken some kind of stand. Obviously, the sort of online discourse and the political environment is much different now than it was the years ago when we were doing the podcast. So I'm not really sure how that would translate today. Just because I think things are a lot more polarized, but back then it was, I think, pretty safe. And I would hope it still would be to a large degree if if there's something that's kind of unsettled and you take a position as to the way that you think it should be or what your research or your interest suggests that it should be, that seems like to show your analytical skills and just show your willingness to, take a side and make an argument.
So I will give a quick anecdote about this and how it kind of manifested itself in my life. My buddy who I mentioned before works for a large law firm in New York. When we graduated law school, he actually went to work for the EEOC, and I got a kind of like maybe a little hectic letter from him or email from him at like 2:00 in the morning or something one day. He was like, "Hey, can we change my name on every post that I've made to Legal Geekery ever?" Because he was concerned that he would have clients who are looking up or not clients, but people on the kind of other side that the government was prosecuting or investigating, look him up. And I've also personally kind of felt the need to be sort of neutral in my views on a lot of things, because I didn't want it to affect my relationship with clients going forward. So I'm probably somebody who kind of moderated myself a lot. And now that I'm not really practicing law, I'm being a lot more vocal about kind of my political views. But I think that probably if you looked at me when I was in law school, you would not have any idea about what my, for instance, political views were. And I was purposefully trying to do that. And I kind of hated it, but I felt like for me, being that I didn't know where I was going to end up, it was the right thing to do. So I sort of would never commit to having strong views one way or the other. Maybe that's not the right thing to do, but that's what I did.
Yeah, so thank you for answering that question. I think that's excellent advice and two different ways to look at it. And I hope law students can find a happy medium when they are writing online. But Laura, I wanted to transition back to you and talk about your career path a little bit. So you're actually a partner at your law firm now, right?
Yes.
Congrats.
So congratulations on that. That's a huge achievement. But can you talk about your process of becoming a partner and what that looked like and getting your name added to the firm?
Yeah, so I think it was maybe an atypical kind of path, just because, I got this job right out of law school. It's in my hometown. I knew it was where I wanted to stay. My family was here. My husband's family was here. So right away that I was totally committed to sticking around. Just personality wise, ended up being a really, really good fit. And I think we're all, we just get along really, really well. And so it seemed like a pretty natural progression. I have no idea how it works in other firms. I have no idea what, like if there's criteria that you normally have to hit. I hear things and read things just like anybody does, but been lucky enough that we never had, thresholds that you had to achieve in order to kind of make that partner ownership track. So I guess we just did well enough, and they invited me to join, I guess a year ago now, a little over a year ago. So I've been in the same place since graduating law school and probably will be here forever. I really enjoy practicing law. I have a very general, just only state court practice. And it's very varied. So I get to do a lot of different things every single day. And I really like that. It's really, intellectually challenging, which is great. And I have tons of client contact.
Excellent. I know a lot of students, law students, like to cast their net wide, and it sounds like you only applying to this one place and getting it really worked out for you. So what would you tell law students that are looking, now that you're with a firm your size, what would you tell law students that are looking to kind of get in that avenue? What ways can they connect and try to find a law firm that may not even be advertising they're looking for an associate?
No, yeah. So. Stop it, Josh. This only happened like once every podcast. I get the giggles. Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm actually looking to hire somebody right now, right out of law school, and it's very interesting looking at their materials. We've hired an associate previously in my tenure here, but it wasn't someone who was right out of law school. And so soliciting the materials and looking for people who are still, in their third year and going to be graduating this spring. My advice is, if you're, no matter how wide or narrow the net is that you're casting, to make sure that you are really careful in proofreading your materials, like making sure that things are precise and done correctly, because that's an easy no pile if you haven't proofread or your formatting is poor. Also, personalizing things. I know it does take a lot of time, and if you're casting a wide net, that can be a tremendous time suck. But this is a small community, and there are certainly students who I've met before, And I remembered them, but they didn't seem to remember me from the materials that they were submitting directly to me. And that was a little bit off-putting. I mean, not that I need people to remember who I am, but just kind of, that in a small town, you probably should have a sense of kind of like who you've met and be willing to just, take the time to personalize things a little bit.
Exactly. That's so true. I love the little bit of advice that I used to get was give your resume to at least 2 or 3 different family members and have them read it, not necessarily looking for like the structure or what like how you've arranged everything, because I think every single person can look at a resume and tell you 5 different things to do differently with it, but just to check spelling, that's the biggest thing. And I learned a lot in that process myself from personal experience, making sure that other people are at least reading over what I'm sending out before I actually hit send. Because one of my biggest downfalls, I guess, is I get so quick to act. I want to be so proactive. I want to get my job. I wanted my application to be sent so quickly, like as soon as I saw the posting. But it is actually like what you just said, taking the time, and it is a time suck, but taking the time to tailor and make sure that everything that you're sending off is perfect, because it can immediately get you put in the no pile, even the smallest mistake. Because that's really, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but whenever I review applications for interns that I have at my company, I always see there might be a small mistake, and that immediately gets them put over, and that can be the difference between getting a job or an internship or not. So definitely good advice.
I was specifically an appellate attorney, and one thing that one of the law clerks told me was, we are all the time looking for an excuse to say that somebody waived something, because for them that's awesome, because they're done with their issue. They don't have to do anything else. And the same way, when I put out a call for resumes, like I am looking at waivers of people who want this job, because I would like to get down to 3 resumes of people that I really like, and then have to scrutinize them all. But to get down to that 3, it can be really hard. I can have like a stack of 50 resumes, and I don't want to read through 50 resumes, and I don't have to, because 25 of them are just terrible, and I can just immediately get rid of them.
Great. Josh, I'd like to kind of switch gears now and talk about your career path, because you're actually no longer practicing law. And I know that some of our viewers may be considering an alternative path following law school. So can you walk us through what your career path has been since you graduated law school?
Yeah, my career path is probably not something anybody would plan out. It's one of those things that sort of happens. So I graduated law school 2010. I practiced 2 years at the appellate division of that law firm that I was talking about in central Pennsylvania. And then I decided that I really wanted to kind of focus more on kind of the academic aspect of the law, because I missed that a lot from law school. I liked law school a lot, and I like kind of the academic theoretical, underpinnings behind what we were studying. And so I kind of focused a lot on that in the PhD program that I went into. So I joined the communications department, specifically focusing on human-computer interaction. So which really just takes the kind of traditional cognitive psychology aspects of, just how the human brain works and applies them to computers. So there's actually a lot of direct analogs between how people interact with computers and how people interact with each other, especially if people kind of associate a computer with a certain gender, which actually happens a lot, or a certain kind of animal, if there's anthropomorphism or anything like that. So there's a lot of really interesting things about that. I wrote a lot of my papers about end-user license agreements and terms of service agreements, and how they can be kind of better written and better constructed so that they're not only kind of easier to write, but a lot easier for a layperson to read and understand. So I wrote a lot on that, and we did a bunch of studies about it, and I showed that in fact we can make this happen. It's not detrimental to people who are writing them, because it's not any less legally authoritative, and it's kind of better for everybody. And after that, I went to work for this company called Fastcase in 27 state bar associations, maybe Iowa too, Laura. If you have a state bar association membership, you have Fastcase access. So I got to apply kind of some of that HCI stuff to the legal realm again. And I I really liked working there. They're doing some really cool kind of analysis on stuff that's traditionally done by human lawyers, who do make mistakes. So they're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and really going through the bar associations to kind of make that happen, which for an attorney reduces costs to almost nothing really if you're a bar association member. So I really enjoyed that. But I got a really cool offer from a big law firm in Philly. I was in DC at the time, to go run their legal research department. So I moved to Philly to take that job, and it was so Philly is the main hub for this particular firm, even though they are a very large law firm. And so the legal department there would field, or the research department there would field research requests from like all of offices all over the world. And there weren't a lot of people doing research, but the kind of people who were working with me, they were amazing. Like they would take requests all day long until 7 at night or something, and then kind of distribute off their research to the attorneys who are requesting stuff. So I did that for a while. It didn't work out for a bunch of different reasons. I went to work at Morgan Lewis temporarily as kind of a conflict analysis attorney. If you ever wanted to see really pissed off big law partners, tell them they can't take a fee agreement. I don't like that. And that was just kind of a temporary thing to hold me over while I was looking for a job in tech. So I ended up going to work for this company called Drama Fever, which was traditionally a Korean drama company. So they kind of were the Netflix of Korean dramas. The two founders of the company, they're guys who kind of saw that people in America really liked Korean dramas, and they made a service for it. And so we ended up making a bunch of other platforms, like multimedia platforms like that. So we did one called Doc Club, which is for AMC, and it's all like documentaries, and one called Shudder, which is all horror movies. And so Warner Brothers kind of liked what we were doing, and they put a bid out to buy us about a year ago now. So we were acquired by them, and our new name is now Warner Brothers Digital Networks. So Drama Fever turned into Warner Brothers Digital Networks. And so that's what I work for now, and we're still like kind of going through that whole acquisition. But it's been pretty great. They haven't changed a lot of things about our culture, and our culture is really strong. I work from home 4 days a week now. We have technically infinite vacation, which just means as long as I get my work done, I can take off as much time as I want. So a lot of cool things about the culture stay the same. I really enjoy the company, and it's a really cool place to work.
Yeah, I bet there's some law students listening that are probably scared, or recent grads that are scared to take a jump and try something different. So what advice? I know some people think that they want to wait until something pushes them over that cliff and they just take the jump, or they take the jump themselves. So what advice would you give to law students who might be thinking and wanting to do something outside the realm of just going to a law firm or going to a judicial opportunity or in-house position? What advice would you give them to get over that hump?
I think that, like anything, well, law school, if nothing else, prepares us to work really hard. And so when I decided that I wanted to do this, I worked really hard. I read a bunch of books on how to ace coding interviews. I had my friends grill me. I wrote a million, problems on whiteboards. I was basically ready for any coding question that somebody could ask me, even though I don't have a degree in programming or computer science. So I really caught up to speed very quickly, I feel like, and that's something that kind of law school trains you for. And then it also trains you for, especially in tech, like most of the people who I interview, and even a lot of the people I work with, are not experts of advocacy, right? Especially not self-advocacy. So being able to sell yourself, it's something that kind of most good law students work on from day one. We're kind of posturing next to our peers. We want to make everybody think we're smarter than we actually are. And that kind of thing actually lends itself super well in tech. So I walk into a tech interview, I feel like 100% of the time, even if I don't have a skill match, I can get past an HR recruiter, no questions asked. And then I'll have my callback interview, and that's when like the real thing starts, right? Because we don't have behavioral interviews in coding specifically. We have problem coding like exams pretty much. So that's when like the hard work comes into play. So law school gets you past HR, and then the hard work gets you past the other tech people.
Great. Yeah, I actually heard one of my friends was telling me about when they were interviewing with Apple for a legal position, they got put into a room with a contract and a memo, and were told to follow the instructions in the memo. So that very much that reminded me very much of what you were just describing, because I think it's very well known that coders, if you go to an interview, you're probably going to get asked to do solve a problem, or multiple problems, if not that. So
I respect that a lot. I mean, even when I was hiring for attorney positions, I don't like behavioral interviews. I don't like it because I think it rewards people who maybe are not super good matches for the kind of work that you're going to do. And I was hiring specifically, like, usually law clerks to work for me as an appellate attorney. So it's important for me to see somebody actually walk through the logic of, hearing a law, and then kind of, what your thoughts are based on that, and then, taking all the case law into account after that. And so I would typically run my interviews by trying to get my hands on, if I had enough time, trying to get my hands on somebody's, comment, or just kind of looking at the titles of things that they've said they've written, and then trying to have an intelligent conversation based on that, and kind of challenging them on kind of some of the assumptions that they maybe made in their papers. And that kind of thing to me is a lot more important than, do you seem like a cool dude I want to drink a beer with? I know they say that when you get your callback interview, people are like, yeah, they just want to see if you want to have a beer with them. And that's probably usually true, but for me, you have to do work for me. So I want to make sure that you're actually going to do a good job.
Laura, I hope we're not giving you any ideas of how you're going to interview some people that you're going to hire.
Well, I do. Yeah, I do want to say that I'm not interested in having a beer with anybody that I hire, at least not in the beginning. So it's going to take a while before we get to that point. But it still is a lot more about personality. And I would say in the law firm context, in a place like Iowa, where everybody's super kind and sincere and compassionate to each other all the time. That's just sort of culturally where we're at. Oftentimes I think we're working against what law school instills in people, and that competitive, kind of better than the person sitting next to you sort of thing. I would be looking for someone who isn't exhibiting, who's just kind of a more laid back, normal, maybe gentler kind of person than the typical law student.
Great. So we're almost out of time, so I want to get this last question in. And Laura, if you want to answer first, then we can get Josh. But let's don't have a panic attack. But let's just pretend we're back in law school right now, and you're about to graduate. What advice would you tell yourself, given today's job market, and the economy, and everything that's going on? What advice would you tell to a law student?
Well, I think advice I would tell to a law student way different than advice I would tell to myself. I would tell myself to take a couple days off. It's something I never did while I was in school, undergrad or law school. But I think for a law student who's actually actively looking for a job and about to graduate, I think we probably can't overemphasize the being a normal human part. Law school teaches you to think a certain way, teaches you to be very competitive, teaches you to prioritize certain things about how you relate to your peers. And some of those things are pretty detrimental for normal human relationships. And if you're going to be in practice with where you have to actually interact with people, whether they're clients or colleagues or members of the court, don't be a jerk. I don't know why I'm kind of hammering on this right now, but I think it is important to just remember that you can be an incredibly bright, successful, zealous advocate without pushing too hard on that. So certainly as I'm interviewing people, I'm looking to see where they show me that they're not just trying to get ahead, and they're actually trying to just do the best that they can for the position that they're advocating. Great.
Josh?
Hey, sorry, my dog's yelling over here. I think that when I was practicing, I was pretty much constantly surprised by kind of the paucity of interested law students wherever I was, right? So I was kind of always at conferences and classes and things where I would notice one or two law students really going out of their way to go there and make connections or learn about whatever we were learning about. And I think that probably if I found myself right now getting ready to come out of law school, I think I would encourage myself to go to more of those things, to go to more bar association meetings where there's a bunch of attorneys who aren't necessarily, putting out a call for resumes, but who potentially would be interested in hiring. And people at those things are like, they're a good time. They're usually at night very drunk and very frank. And it's super different than meeting somebody at like an event at your school where everybody's kind of on guard for what they're going to say. So I would definitely encourage myself to go find all the meetings nearby that are within my means to go to, and just kind of make friends with people. I mean, when I was going to stuff at the Bar Association or State College Bar Association, like everybody knows who is looking for a job. There's a law student there that people think might be a good match with somebody else. They, refer them to that firm. Like there's a lot of that stuff that happens that people just, because we're millennials. We don't want to like go out and meet people. We want to like look for like a posting on its site and click a button and that's it, right? But when there's a tough market, you got to go out of your way to kind of go above and beyond that. And I think that's a really good way to do that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Josh, so much for taking the time today. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time. But before we wrap up, is there a way that people can reach out to you if they want to follow up with any questions? How can they reach out?
You can still find me on Twitter, Bergus.
Well, yeah, I'm on Twitter at Legal Geekery, or if you really want to get in touch with me, you can email me at legalgeekery@gmail.com.
Great. Thank you again. And well, that wraps up this week's show. Remember, if you have any questions, comments, or just feedback in general, feel free to hit me up in the comments below or over at my website, franklingraves.com. Please do remember to subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, click the subscribe button, or you can also find us in your favorite podcast app if you're listening to audio only.
Thanks for listening to the Law School Strategy Podcast. Check out lawschoolstrategy.com and make sure you subscribe to never miss an episode of the Law School Strategy Podcast. We're on all podcast apps and on YouTube, so leave a review. Connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Remember, nothing in this podcast should be considered legal advice. Please consult with an attorney on any legal issues you may be facing.